Hi everybody, I am Arglefump. This is my review for the 10th Sammy Keys book, Sammy Keys and the Dead Giveaway. So, big book number 10, huh? Wow, that's amazing. So there's a couple of things that happen when your series reaches book 10, and I did notice them with this book. Number one, we get different quotes for the back of the book. Like at the start of the series, pretty much every quote advertising the book was something like, "Look out, Nancy Drew, Sammy Keys is on the case." But no, the quotes no longer try to establish Sammy Keys as this young upstart, dethroning Nancy Drew as the queen of literary fiction. No. Now the quotes are things like, "Hey, Sammy Keys delivers another home run. She does it again. This is as good as the other books." That is, they're treating her like an established character in an established series. They're no longer trying to make it seem like she's this brand new character. No, she's a legitimate character in a legitimate mystery series of her own. And that's good. I like that. Another thing related to reviews is that the series has gone long enough that it gets a little bit of a bump in reviews. Because I've noticed with a lot of series, the first 3 or so books tend to be the least popular, and this is the case with Wimpy Kid, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. This is a case with this particular book in the Hannah Swenson series, and I'm sure Harry Potter, Little House on the Prairie, bunch of other books I've done reviews for. I've noticed that the first 3 or so books tend to have lower scores because I'm not sure why. I think it's because a lot of kids were forced to read those books in school and they just didn't like the books for whatever reason, and so they gave those books low scores. But by the time you reach book number 10, there's a little bump in the review scores. They tend to go skew a little bit higher because all the negative reviews just kind of drop off. Like all the people who didn't like the first 3 books of the series, they're not sticking around to book 10. They're not going to be reading this. So they're not going to be bringing the score down because they didn't read this book. Yeah, the fans, the people who really like the series are the ones that stuck around. And so that's why towards the end of the series, you tend to get higher review scores. At least that's something I've noticed. So, definitely the case with this one. I believe this is the highest rated book of the series yet. I'm a little surprised by that because I thought the previous book was better. This one is 0.04 higher than the previous book, which granted is not like the hugest jump ever, but yeah, it's definitely more popular than the previous book in the series. I thought Psycho Kitty Queen was a better book. I thought it was more entertaining, and I thought the mystery was better tied directly to Sammy, whereas in this case, the premise is reused from book number 3. Sammy has to do church work for a month. In this case, she's helping out this old lady who needs her dog walked every day. And while she's there, she sort of stumbles upon a mystery, and she ends up solving the mystery. And the mystery is that this mean woman is trying to destroy the neighborhood. She wants it bulldozed in order to build this very fancy, expensive rec center. And yeah, I did like the idea that Sammy has mixed feelings about this mystery because she really wants to have the rec center, but she doesn't want this poor old woman to have her house torn down. And yeah, I kind of like that. But I think it could have been executed better. Sammy gets a whiff of mystery when the mean woman, who thinks she runs the town, is seen with the lawyer, and she tells the lawyer, "You've got to fight it. You've got to make sure that the neighborhood is not torn down." And it's like, whoa. Why is she telling a lawyer to fight the neighborhood being torn down if she really wants the neighborhood to be torn down? There's also sort of like a second mystery. I guess you could call it maybe a fake-out mystery, but that occurs about halfway through. Is somebody robs this railroad museum, which is in the neighborhood, and Sammy hilariously defeats the bad guys by just hanging a shovel from the fence, and the bad guy just wasn't really looking, just smacks his head against it and falls down because the police are so useless. She yells at the police, "There's a theft happening right now, you've got to stop him!" And then the police officer's like, "Okay, let me start filling out a report." And Sammy's like, "No! Don't fill out a report! Catch the criminal first!" That was so hilarious. And I did like how we had 2 new police officers, instead of just having the same police officer every single time, because it's really realistic to not have the exact same police officer, 10 books in a row. There are more than just 2 police officers. I think we've seen 2 police officers in the previous books, right? There's more than just 2, so now we get 2 more, and that's cool. I like that. Like, I know 3 different police. I've interacted with at least 3 different police officers in my town, so I'm glad to see that Sammy Keys has finally caught up to me in terms of the number of police officers she can recognize. Yeah, and I mean, that was kind of funny. Let's see, there's also somebody, like, throws threatening messages through windows, breaking windows. I did like how Sammy cleverly solved that. Doesn't work so well in book form. It's because the threatening message is, like, misspelled, and she knows who the culprit is because the one character... I'll just look up her name, okay? I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. Oh, right, I forgot about the other half of the book instead. Give me a second. I'm trying to find the name. She does appear at some point. Let's see. So at the city council meeting, here we go. Willawago, Willawago, Willawago. And so the culprit pronounces her name Willywago instead of Willawago. And that's how Sammy's able to realize, you must be the person who wrote that note. Only somebody who pronounces it Willywago would misspell it that way. And yeah, that's clever. That doesn't come across so well in book form, where we can't actually hear the character's pronunciation. I'm sure in the audiobook, that's not a problem. The mean lady who's trying to bulldoze the area actually did, like, a classic villain move, which is she set up a fake corporation, which is just an anagram of her name, like Earl Clooney. Those are the letters of her name rearranged. And she used that to secretly buy property, which she was planning on bulldozing. And she wanted to, like, increase the price of the property so she could make a profit. And that's why she was secretly encouraging people to protest the area being torn down. But she didn't want them to be successful. She just wanted them to be successful enough in protesting to raise the price up. Yeah. One final thing about Mrs. Willawago and that particular storyline is, this is just a completely pointless complaint, which doesn't really even affect the book. But she's portrayed as, like, this super religious Catholic person, but her husband was cremated. And that's something that struck me as a little bit odd, because she would have been alive. She would have been an adult at the time that the Catholic Church started allowing cremation for the first time. The ban against cremation was lifted, and I'm sure that was, like, a huge fight in Catholic circles at the time. I wasn't alive then, but she would have been alive then. And so I think somebody who's, like, super old-fashioned Catholic, probably, she grew up. They didn't allow cremation. And so I think, well, maybe she shouldn't be so on board with the idea of cremation. Just a minor thing. So anyway, so that's a mystery story. I'll come back to it at the end when I get into spoiler territory. But the other part of the book, which is really disconnected from the mystery, and you can see that the mystery doesn't really affect Sammy so much as it's, it doesn't really have a direct effect on her life. And so that really, I felt like that kind of hurt the book. She wasn't as motivated to try to solve the mystery as she was in the previous book. Like, her poor cat might be killed. That's a really strong motive for her to solve the mystery and stop the person who's murdering cats. Also, her friend works in a pet store. Strong motives. Whereas this one, it's like, well, bad stuff is happening to this lady I kind of don't like, but I still walk her dog because grandma makes me do it. And yeah, that's not as strong as a motive. So the school storyline is pretty strong too, which is, it's the telltale heart, basically. Sammy accidentally kills her teacher's bird, and she feels really, really, really terrible about it, but she can't confess because she'll get in huge trouble. Also, her worst enemy, Heather, is blamed for killing the bird. And then Sammy's wondering, it's like, well, I do want Heather to be in trouble, but I wasn't planning on doing it. And that sort of seems to be the sticking point. It's like, if she was actually trying to get Heather in trouble, that's one thing. But accidentally getting Heather in trouble, that's another thing entirely. And so she feels really bad. Sammy also, at the exact same time this happens, a second mystery, she sees Heather stealing ballots for the class personality contest at the end of the year, because this book takes place in June. So, Sammy, I didn't quite understand why Sammy couldn't just tell the teacher about the personality theft without going into, oh yeah, I was hiding in the classroom that the entire time. I think Sammy could have been able to separate those two events, but in her mind, they're both like completely linked together, and that sort of prevents her from confessing. It's just like, well, the teacher will think I'm just trying to get Heather in trouble, or I'm just trying to get myself out of trouble, and that sort of thing, but it really hurts Sammy. And she talks about the pain, and especially having to lie to her friends, and Marissa getting very upset about it, and how it just sort of twists her up inside. And she feels a lot better when she actually does confess and tells the truth. And Mrs. Ambler, that's the teacher, is very nice about it. She actually feels kind of terrible for being so mean to Heather, because she was really mean to Heather because she thought Heather killed her beloved pet bird. And the class personality stuff is being announced at this big dance with 7th and 8th graders. And Casey goes. He invites Sammy. So Sammy goes with Casey and Marissa and a bunch of their friends. And it's sold as, well, this is just a fun get-together. But Sammy realizes, oh my gosh, this is actually like a date. And so she has her first date with Casey. And they kind of have a romantic moment doing the slow dance. And that was cute. And, the contest winners are announced, and it turns out that Sammy won most unique style over Heather. Yay! Sammy didn't even know she was in the running. She was actually a write-in winner, whereas Heather did not win. Heather did not win. The ballots that she faked were completely thrown out because she wrote her own name in, so it was really easy to tell which ballots were the fake ones. Like, wait a minute, there are 60 extra ballots, and all 60 of them say Heather Acosta. So, I mean, that was an okay ending. I don't know what's going to happen. Is Heather going to be there after school? It kind of made it seem like Heather's not going to be there next year, which probably would be for the best, but that would spare the series a lot of drama. We've got to have Heather still around for her to be the main antagonist. So something I didn't like was there's a lot of silly pirate talk during the 8th grade, 7th grade dance, and I just really didn't care for it. I'm sure it's realistic. I'm sure I would have done something silly like that, like pretend to be a pirate all night long. But I didn't think that was that funny or amusing. It was kind of distracting and annoying, to be honest. Didn't like that as much. Oh, speaking of which, these pictures, yeah, we don't have the illustrations after every single chapter like we did in some of the previous books. Obviously they brought back the same illustrator, Dan Yacarino, but yeah, we don't have constant pictures. That's weird. I don't know why they stopped with the picture thing. They didn't fire the artist. They just kept the artist, just stopped doing the regular pictures. So getting into the big finale, I felt like the big finale fell flat. Again, I think the finale for the previous book was better with the big twist. It also lasted a little bit longer. I think that helped too. And there's more of an emotional undercurrent to it as well, I would say. So all in all, I'd say that I thought the previous book was, I'd give like this book 1 point less than the previous book, because I thought the previous book was better, but this was still good. I've already said my complaints that I don't think the mystery was like important enough to Sammy. I don't think it was tight enough. It's more like she's solving the mystery because she's in the area and she solves mysteries, and that's what she does. I did like the main story of her at school. That was good. Didn't like the ending so much, which was a lot of weird pirate stuff. But I did like seeing Sammy interact with her teacher and, bring an end to the school year. And there is a segment where at the end where she thinks about You know, I could punch Heather like I did at the start of the year, but I won't because that won't help. But you can tell that Sammy's really grown and developed as a person and as a character, and that was good. But the big shock twist at the very ending, and I think we get like one chapter about it and then sort of like half a chapter resolution to about it. No, 2 pages resolution, and Sammy's like, okay, well, enough about that. Let me talk about what happened with my friends. So you might be able to guess it from the title, Dead Giveaway. Dead Giveaway. There's a murder. There's been a murder. And, you know, you're at the end of the book. It's like, wait, well, there's the word dead in the title, but nobody's been murdered yet. And so you could argue, well, you know, me just giving you that giant hint, can you figure out what happens? What's the big twist? I suppose I should mention there was a dog that was constantly digging under the fence. Yeah, that's the big deal. That was the dog that was Sammy was walking. There's sort of a big deal about the dog digging things up constantly. What could the dog be trying to dig up? Well, okay, so spoiler alert, even though I've dropped a bunch of hints. So next door neighbor killed her husband, buried him in the compost heap, and that's why she's fighting the area being bulldozed, is because she doesn't think his body has finished decomposing. And she knows they're probably gonna find the dead body, and she'll be in huge trouble. And her husband was a terrible person. It's well established in the book that he did terrible things to her, like, not sure I can say these things without this review getting flagged for adult content, but let's say he was an abusive husband who drank a lot and did bad things. And so after years and years, also a lot of gaslighting too, just lying to her, telling her that nobody will ever believe you, nobody will ever like you. So after years and years and years of that, she eventually killed him. And that did actually surprise me because he shows up in several scenes. To be honest, I kind of had his character confused with Appliance Andy, who is the guy who was robbing the train station earlier. Did I mention the train station robbery? I totally forget if I did. Let me go back and talk about the train station robbery. So that was something that happened like halfway through. Somebody was stealing things from like the train station museum, which is in the neighborhood. And it was really funny how Sammy defeated them by just putting a shovel. The shovel, because digging is a main theme of the book, because, you know, it also ties into like digging and uncovering secrets, but literally because there's a dead body buried in the area. So she puts the shovel on the fence, and the bad guy walks into the shovel and knocks himself out. And that was pretty funny. And it was also funny how Sammy had to do that because the 2 police officers were completely useless. I thought that was funny. Like, she yells at the officers, there's a robbery going on right now, you've got to stop it. And the officer starts writing a report, and she's like, no, don't write a report, stop the robbery. Again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. I forget if I said that or not earlier in this review, but I did like how there were 2 new police officers in this book instead of just the same police officer, Borsch, who's been in like every single book so far. It's glad to see there's another police officer in town, not just the one guy. So that's realistic and good. Anyway, so she was impersonating her husband, off and on, a couple of times. That explains why her husband never talked or anything, and why he would just violently approach Sammy to get rid of her. So, anyway, yeah, you really couldn't see that big twist reveal coming, although you could see the twist that there's a dead body in the area, and if you thought hard about it, you'd have to wonder, okay, who's dead? And there aren't that many choices, but still, somebody was impersonating the dead guy all along. That is a bit of a twist. I did like that twist. I just, you know, I kind of like the twist at the end of the previous book longer. And then the big confrontation, the big finale to the previous book, as I said, went on longer than the one in this book. Whereas this one, as soon as Sammy figures out, she confronts Mrs. Stone, and she basically breaks down and confesses right away. Whereas in the previous book, it was more like, okay, we figured it out. We've still got to escape the bad guys. There is still danger and such. So there's a lot more tension. Whereas this is one of the ones where the bad guy basically gives up, doesn't put up a fight. Okay, so those are my thoughts on Sammy Keys and the Dead Giveaway. I'm sorry, I tried to make this a 10-minute review. Looks like I talked for twice as long as I thought I would. But that's something I've been doing with all these Sammy Keys books because they're very enjoyable. And they're also quite long too. Like we're going up 270 pages every single book. So yeah, I'm surprised, man, that the author is consistently able to keep these books so long and of such high quality. So it's definitely a good entry in the series. I liked it. I just did not like it as much as the previous book, which I thought was funnier and had a better emotional undercurrent to the actual mystery. Okay, those are my thoughts. Bye. Oh, another thing. There's a Sammy Keys spinoff called Runaway, which is sort of like a backstory to Holly, which was published after this book. So it was done after this book, but before the next Sammy Keys book. So next month, I'll actually be reading Runaway. I won't be reading the next book in the Sammy Keys series. I'll be reading the Sammy Keys spinoff, and then I'll get back to the Sammy Keys series, okay? Okay, so you can look for that next month. Bye.